You ever meet someone and just know they're running from something? I was on the last train heading west, whiskey in my flask, trying to forget a war that wouldn't forget me. Then she walked into that rail car. 3 leather bags, no name, and eyes that held more secrets than the desert held sand. She sat across from me, dress clinging to curves that could make a saint reconsider heaven, and said just 2 words. Don't ask. Partner, I should have gotten off at the next stop. Should have kept my head down and my questions to myself. But by the time that iron horse reached the last station, I knew her secrets, her scars, and the taste of her lips in the darkness between towns. Pour yourself a drink if you're settling in for this one. If this story's worth your time, hit that subscribe button and let me know where you're listening from. It was late September, 1869. The Transcontinental Railroad had been finished just 4 months prior, and every desperate soul with something to hide was riding those rails toward the Pacific. I was one of them. 3 years since Appomattox. 3 years since I'd taken off the Union Blue and tried to forget the faces of the men I'd killed. The war was over, but the nightmares weren't. So I did what broken men do. I ran west, chasing the sunset like it might wash away the blood. The train car was nearly empty that afternoon. Just me, an old prospector snoring in the back, and the rhythmic clatter of iron wheels on iron rails. I had my hat pulled low, boots propped up on the seat across from me, watching the Kansas plains blur into nothing. That's when she walked in. The door between cars slammed open, bringing a gust of wind and the smell of coal smoke. She stood there in the doorway, silhouetted against the bright prairie sun. And for a moment, I thought maybe I was seeing things. Maybe the whiskey had finally caught up with me. But no, she was real. She wore a dark blue traveling dress, the kind Eastern women wore, fitted tight at the waist, and cut just low enough to make a man look twice. Her dark hair was pinned up, but loose strands whipped around her face in the wind. And those eyes, gray like storm clouds, swept across the car until they landed on me. She was carrying 3 leather bags, heavy ones, from the way she struggled with them. She moved down the aisle, heels clicking on the wooden floor, and stopped right beside my seat. "This taken?" she asked. Her voice was low, with just a hint of something I couldn't place. East Coast money, maybe. Boston or Philadelphia. I moved my boots. "All yours." She sat down across from me, arranging those 3 bags around her feet like they were children she needed to protect. When she finally settled, she looked up and caught me staring. "Don't ask," she said simply. I tipped my hat. Wasn't planning to. She smiled at that. Just barely. But enough to show she appreciated a man who knew when to keep his mouth shut. The train lurched forward, picking up speed as we left the station behind. I tried to focus on the window, on the endless prairie, but my eyes kept drifting back to her. The way she sat, back straight, hands folded in her lap. The way she'd glance at those bags every few minutes, like she was making sure they hadn't disappeared. After about an hour, she spoke again. "You have any whiskey left in that flask?" I did. Pulled it from my coat and handed it over without a word. She took it, unscrewed the cap, and drank deep. Not a ladylike sip, partner. A real drink. The kind a person takes when they're trying to drown something. When she handed it back, her fingers brushed mine. Just for a second, but long enough for me to feel the tremor in her hands. "Thank you," she said. "Where you headed?" I asked. "West." "That's a big place. Far as this train goes." She looked out the window then, at the darkening sky. "You?" "Same." She studied me for a long moment, those gray eyes taking in my worn coat, my calloused hands, the way I kept my right hand close to where my gun used to hang before they made us check our weapons. "You look like a man with regrets," she said. I laughed, but there wasn't any humor in it. "You look like a woman with secrets." Good, she replied. Then we understand each other. That first night, I didn't sleep. Neither did she. We sat in that swaying car, passing the flask back and forth, not talking much, but not needing to. Sometimes understanding doesn't need words. Around midnight, she finally told me her name. Catherine, she said quietly. Catherine Pembroke. Pleasure, Catherine. Don't, she interrupted. I told you mine because I won't be using it much longer. But yours? Keep it. Some things are better left unknown. That should have been my warning, partner. Should have told me this woman was trouble with a capital T. But I was already caught, like a fish on a line I didn't see coming. The next morning came harsh and bright. The porter came through with coffee and hard biscuits. Catherine was asleep, her head tilted against the window. And in that moment, she looked younger. Vulnerable. The kind of woman who deserved better than whatever she was running from. I was watching her sleep, which I know makes me sound like some kind of fool, when the train pulled into a small station outside Abilene. A handful of passengers got on. Ranch hands, a family with squalling children, and a man in a black suit. The man in the black suit walked through our car slow, eyes scanning every face. When he reached our row, he stopped, looked at Catherine's bags, then at Catherine herself, still sleeping. "Excuse me," he said to me. "That woman, you traveling with her?" Something in his tone made my hand twitch toward where my gun should have been. "Why?" "Just asking." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "She look familiar to you?" "Nope, never seen her before in my life." He studied me for another moment, then tipped his hat and moved on. But I saw him take a seat 3 rows back, where he could watch us. Catherine's eyes were open, had been the whole time. "Friend of yours?" I asked quietly. "Pinkerton," she whispered. "They've been following me since Chicago." "What did you do?" She looked at me then, really looked at me, like she was deciding whether I was worth the truth. Finally, she leaned forward, close enough that I could smell lavender in her hair. "I killed my husband," she said. "Partner, I've heard a lot of confessions in my time. Men who'd stolen, murdered, done terrible things, and wanted absolution they didn't deserve. But the way Catherine said it, calm, matter of fact, like she was commenting on the weather, that chilled me more than any of them." "He have it coming?" I asked. "Does it matter?" "To me it does." She sat back, studying my face. "He was a banker. Rich, respectable, belonged to all the right clubs. On our wedding night, I learned what kind of man he really was, what he liked to do to women when nobody was watching." Her hands were clenched in her lap now, knuckles white. "I stayed for 2 years, played the dutiful wife, let him parade me around at parties while he smiled at his friends and whispered about what he'd do to me when we got home. Then one night, I put poison in his whiskey, watched him die slow while I sat in my favorite chair and read poetry." She looked me dead in the eye. "The bags, his money, every dollar he made off other people's misery. I'm taking it west and starting over. And if you want to turn me into that Pinkerton back there, partner, now's your chance." I should have done it. Should have called for the conductor, let justice take its course. But I'd seen evil in the war, seen what men did when they thought nobody was watching. And I'd seen enough to know that sometimes justice wears a dress and carries poison. "How much further you planning to go?" I asked instead. "San Francisco. I have contacts there, people who can help me disappear." "Then we'd better make sure you get there." The relief in her eyes was so raw it hurt to see. The Pinkerton got off at the next station, but not before he gave Catherine one last long look, the kind that said, this wasn't over. Over the next 3 days, I watched Catherine transform. The Eastern sophistication melted away bit by bit, replaced by something harder. She started wearing her hair down, changed into simpler dresses that she bought at station stops, practiced speaking with a Western drawl. By the fourth day, Catherine Pembroke was gone. In her place was a woman with no past and no name, just 3 bags of blood money and a future she was willing to fight for. We talked more as the miles rolled by. She told me about growing up in Boston, about her father who'd sold her to the highest bidder. I told her about the war, about the friends I'd buried, and the men I'd killed, and the nightmares that wouldn't let me sleep. "We're quite a pair," she said one evening as we watched the sunset paint the Rocky Mountains gold. "A murderer and a soldier." "What's the difference?" I asked. She smiled. "One of us feels guilty." That night, somewhere in the darkness between stations, she kissed me. It wasn't gentle or romantic, like in those dime novels. It was desperate, hungry. The kiss of 2 people who'd been drowning and finally found something to hold on to. Her hands gripped my coat, pulling me closer. Mine found her waist, felt the curves beneath that travel-worn dress. "Don't ask why," she whispered against my lips. "Wasn't planning to." We made love in that rattling train car, the darkness hiding us from whatever gods might judge. Her skin was soft beneath my rough hands. She moved like music, like water, like everything I'd forgotten the world could still offer. And when it was over, she lay against my chest, her hair spilled across me like dark silk, and I felt something I hadn't felt in 3 long years. Peace. "What happens when we reach San Francisco?" I asked. "I disappear. You forget you ever met me. And if I don't want to forget?" She lifted her head, those gray eyes searching mine in the darkness. "Then you're a fool," she said. But she smiled when she said it. The last day on that train, everything changed. We were 2 hours outside San Francisco when 3 men boarded at a small station. They wore long coats despite the California heat, and they moved through the car like wolves hunting prey. The lead one stopped at our row. He was tall, scarred, with dead eyes that had seen too much killing. "Mrs. Pembroke," he said. Not a question. A statement. Catherine's hand found mine beneath the table, squeezed once. "I'm afraid you have me confused with someone else," she said, her voice steady. "No confusion, ma'am. I'm here on behalf of the Pembroke family. They'd like their money back, and they'd like to see you hang for murder." I started to stand, but Catherine's grip tightened. "How much are they paying you?" she asked calmly. $5,000. "I'll pay you 10 to walk away." The man smiled. "See, that's the problem, Mrs. Pembroke. It ain't about the money anymore. You made powerful men look foolish. That's something that requires blood." He reached for her, and that's when I moved. I hit him hard, square in the jaw, before his companions could react. We went down in a tangle of fists and boots, passengers screaming and scattering. I felt his knife slice across my ribs but didn't stop, couldn't stop. The conductor came running with a shotgun, and suddenly everyone froze. What in the hell is going on here? The scarred man stood up slowly, wiping blood from his mouth. "Just a misunderstanding, conductor. We'll be getting off at the next stop." But his eyes were on me, promising that this wasn't over. After they left, Catherine pressed a handkerchief to my bleeding side. "You didn't have to do that," she said quietly. "Yes, I did." "Why?" I caught her hand, held it against my chest where she could feel my heart hammering. "Because somewhere between Kansas and here, I stopped running from my past and started running towards something. And that something looks a hell of a lot like you." Tears filled those gray eyes, but she blinked them away. When the train finally pulled into San Francisco, the platform was crowded with people rushing to meet loved ones, workers unloading cargo, children running between legs. Catherine gathered her 3 bags, but I took 2 of them from her. "Where to?" I asked. She gave me an address. A boarding house down by the wharf where no one asked questions and everyone paid in cash. We walked through the city as the sun set over the Pacific, painting everything gold. She looked different in that California light, younger, freer. At the boarding house, she finally turned to face me. "This is where we say goodbye," she said. "Does it have to be? I'm a murderer on the run, partner. That's no life to offer anyone. Maybe I'm not looking for a good life. Maybe I'm just looking for an honest one. And the most honest thing I've done in 3 years is get on that train with you." She studied my face for a long moment. Then she smiled. A real smile this time, the kind that reached her eyes. "Rooms paid for a month," she said. "If you're fool enough to stay, I suppose I'm fool enough to let you." I followed her inside, into a future neither of us had planned, but both of us needed. And as the door closed behind us, I realized something important. Partner, sometimes you run from your past so long, you forget that you're allowed to stop. Sometimes the end of the line is just the beginning. We stayed in San Francisco for 6 months, long enough for the Pinkertons to lose interest. Long enough for Catherine's hair to grow longer, for her Eastern accent to disappear completely. Long enough for me to learn that redemption doesn't come from running. It comes from choosing to stand still with someone worth standing beside. She never did tell me her real name. Said Catherine was as good as any other, and the woman she'd been before didn't matter anymore. I never told her about some of the things I did in the war either. Some secrets are better left buried. We took that money from those 3 bags and bought a small ranch up north near the Redwoods. Started over, just like she'd planned. Only this time, she wasn't alone. Folks in town knew us as Mr. and Mrs., whoever we said we were. Nobody asked questions. That's the thing about the West, partner. It's full of people trying to forget who they used to be. Sometimes at night, she'd wake up gasping from nightmares about her husband. I'd hold her until the shaking stopped, until she remembered she was safe. And sometimes, I'd wake up screaming about the war, and she'd do the same for me. That's what love is, I think. Not the pretty parts they write about in books. It's holding someone's demons along with your own. It's choosing to stay when running would be easier. She's in the kitchen now as I tell you this story, probably wondering why I'm talking to myself again. That dark hair has silver in it now, and those gray eyes have lines at the corners from smiling. She still keeps those 3 bags in the back of our closet, empty now, but she can't quite let them go. Sometimes I think about that train, about what would have happened if I'd turned her into that Pinkerton, if I'd been the kind of man who followed rules instead of his gut. But I'm not that man. Never was. See, partner, the thing about running is this. You can run from your past, but you can't run from yourself. Sooner or later, you gotta stop and face who you really are. I faced it on a train heading west with a woman who killed her husband and stole his money. And you know what? I'd do it all again. Sometimes the right choice isn't the lawful one. Sometimes justice wears poison on her lips and blood money in her bags. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough, she kisses you in the darkness between stations and offers you something worth more than redemption. She offers you a reason to stop running. If you've listened this far, partner, maybe you understand what I'm trying to say. Hit that subscribe button, leave a comment, and I'll be here next time with another tale from the dusty roads. Until then, may your trails be clear and your whiskey warm.